Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're opening up a rather cursed tome, stepping right into a dark fairy tale. It's a story that chronicles the tragic, inevitable clash between rigid arrogance and the fluid, unrelenting chaos of reality. Imagine, if you will, a world drafted entirely in gray blueprints, a place where the gods demand absolute, static order, right? Only to have their grand manuscripts completely dismantled by something as simple as spilled ink. This is the chronicle of Donar, the master of the storm, and the chaotic authors we call the Living Ink. Let's turn the page, shall we?
You have not outrun the dungeon. You have merely made the dungeon infinite. Man, what a chilling quote to start with. I really want to plunge you straight into the biting cold of the Sils Maria uplands with this one. It's a warning from the shadow to the wanderer, a man who had just shattered the cathedrals of his ancestors using his own iron hammer of genealogy. The air is freezing, the sky is the color of a bruised plum, and his shadow, grown incredibly long and articulate in that gothic dusk, delivers this devastating realization. It perfectly sets the grim tone for us. Simply breaking old rules doesn't actually make you free if you're just replacing them with new heavy stones. Which brings us to Section 1, The Illusion of Stone, or The Kingly Fool's Ego. Okay, let's dive right into this first act. We need to look closely at Donar, the kingly fool himself. Notice how his heavy stone hammer isn't just a big weapon, it's literally the physical manifestation of his ego, the I. In a world built on fluid reality, Donar tries to use this massive hammer to enforce an absolute, static meaning upon the text of the world. He just has this profound disgust for the silent decay of Yggdrasil. He absolutely loathes the quiet fading of the gods. So instead of adapting, he demands a kingly crash, a violence and absolute negation of everything he views as corrupt. He essentially wants to smash the manuscript to save it. Doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole dynamic up in Valhalla. On one side, you have Wotan, completely representing suffocating hypocrisy and brittle diplomatic treaties. On the other side is Donar, who firmly believes truth is the thunder. He demands a cleansing strike. But here is the truly tragic irony. Donar is just a puppet. His rage, his desire for this violent purge is actually being totally manipulated in a cosmic theater by Lutgard. Donar's righteous fury is nothing more than a predetermined spark drafted right into the margins, meant to just burn his own kingdom to the ground.
Moving on to Section 2, Enter the Living Ink, the Chaotic Medicine.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that a calcified, stone-rigid text is a text just waiting to shatter. But look at this definition. The living ink? They aren't the villains in this dark fable at all. Actually, they are vital, chaotic medicine. They are the primal authors of chaos, whose entire purpose is to act as an essential pressure valve for reality itself. They unbind the gray lines. They rewrite the world from forced order, intervening just in the nick of time to edit what would be a devastating tragedy into this grand, unscripted comedy.
This living ink manifests as the three spirit siblings, also known as the siblings of the spill. We've got the wit, who acts as a sort of distorting mirror to power. Then we have the hunger, who creates this absolute void in logic and reason. And finally, there's the small, the youngest sibling, who specializes in the artful mistake. These three completely refuse to stay within the lines of a drafted world, and as you'll see in a second, they just effortlessly deconstruct the god of thunder. Let's see exactly how they do that in Section 3, The Parables of Absurdity, Deconstructing the Thunder. Okay, let's dive into this, because watching the siblings dismantle Donar's rigid ego is literally a masterclass in philosophical deconstruction. We start with the parable of the cardboard thunderbolt. I want you to picture Donar standing way up upon the high, rocky precipices overlooking the decay of Valhalla. His voice is rumbling, shaking the stones right beneath his boots. He is projecting this mask of absolute, terrifying authority to the world. And then, casually climbing up the crags, comes the wit. Now, the whole world expected a massive clash of titans here, right? Absolute negation meeting an immutable force. But the wit simply approaches as a distorting mirror, taps the angry god on his chin, and with a single burst of cynical laughter reveals the ultimate truth. The immutable stone is actually just paper mache. The wit exposes that Donar's hard grip on his hammer is really just a desperate attempt to hide his trembling hands. In an instant, a calcified text of divine rage is entirely rewritten into a heap of delightful absurdity. It's brilliant.
Next up, we move to the parable of the lightning slurry. So Donar is furious. He's attempting to weave this massive, world-shattering tempest built on precise equations of thunderous justice, all to purge the silent decay. But watching him intently from the void in the logic is the second sibling, the hunger.
Donar is fully expecting this majestic, kingly crash. He's hurling blinding, blue-white bolts of lightning meant to just shatter the earth. But what actually happens? Well, the hunger finds all this self-righteous logic to be incredibly nutritious and simply swallows the thread of the storm. The lightning doesn't crash at all. It liquefies. It turns into this wet, black slurry, leaving the mighty god of thunder standing awkwardly in a puddle of ink, surrounded by a cacophony of, wait, how did this happen?
Which brings us to the climax in Section 4, the final hiccup, the ignited apocalypse.
But of course, Donar refuses to learn, and that leads us straight into the agonizing train wreck of Valhalla's fall. Before the final strike, we have to understand his target here, the Bound Blight. This transfigured dark elf is essentially a mirror to Donar, holding the alchemical fuel of his own divine ego. Donar looks at this entity and sees a complete abomination, a disgusting ulcer on the world's text. What he is completely blind to, though, is that striking this mirror is literally a fatal blow against the very foundations of his own house.
Let's walk through this excruciating timeline right through the eyes of the youngest sibling, the Small. As Donar winds up this massive, rigid swing, absolutely desperate to smash the foundations, the Small darts in, offering a gentle, chaotic nudge, a little royal hiccup. To the siblings, it's just a playful out, you know? A breeze meant to remind a stiff god how to dance. They watch in total disbelief as Donar, completely trapped in his rigid gate, actually fights the whim. He forces the blow to land, and because of that, Valhalla is swallowed in suit.
It's so tragic because the Smalls only intended a simple rewrite. They tried to playfully blur the ink on reality, hoping to turn a rigid decree of execution into a harmless decree of desert. But Donar flat out rejected the edit. He chose justified termination instead. By forcing the blow, his divine lightning hit the Blight's shadow energy, igniting the parasitic blood oath and birthing the Thorn of Twilight, which just impaled Valhalla from below. His arrogant, stubborn refusal to adapt literally destroyed everything.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, the Wanderer's Wand, the Amphitheater of Becoming.
Let's shift our focus away from Donar's ashes for a second and look back at the snowy, bruised plum skies of the uplands. The contrast here is the true philosophical core of our dark tale. Donar's fate is a static collapse. Because he absolutely would not bend, he broke, sinking in silence right into an absolute, freezing dark. The Wanderer, however, chooses a completely different path. Having left the herd and the pious city far behind, he steps bravely into the white spaces of the map, the blank pages. He's on a truly transformative journey.
Let's see how this builds through the Wanderer's awakening. First, he looks down at his own tool of deconstruction, his iron hammer, and recognizes it for what it is, a grim warning. He sees the totally erased text of Donar's world. Second, rather than fighting chaos like Donar did, he lets the spirit siblings pool around his feet. He accepts their chaotic medicine. And finally, through this profound realization, his heavy iron hammer melts into a wooden jester's wand. He realizes that seeking absolute truth, without a sense of play, without flexibility, merely builds another tomb.
So, with his new wand in hand, the Wanderer steps away from the wreckage of that kingly crash and moves toward what's called the Amphitheater of Becoming. He fully embraces the fluidity of meaning. He is no longer clinging to stone or trying to force a tragic, static order onto the manuscript of the world. Instead, he authors his own values, participating in a grand, completely unscripted comedy where the ink is always wet.
Which brings us to our final thought. The tragedy of the kingly fool shows us the fatal danger of rigidity, of believing our blueprints are somehow divine and unchangeable. The parables of the living ink shows us that absurdity and chaos are actually the medicines that keep the world breathing. The page is damp, and the story of reality is constantly being rewritten right in front of us. So, I leave you with this question. Are you going to cling to the heavy stone hammers of the past, or are you ready for the next line where the ink is always wet? Keep learning, stay flexible, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.